Welcome to New Consciousness Review. I'm Miriam Knight, and our guest today is Jonas Elrod, the filmmaker and the main subject of the documentary Wake Up, which was released last year and has just been featured twice on the Oprah Winfrey Network. Jonas was leading a pretty ordinary life as a filmmaker and a musician until he woke up one day with the ability to access other dimensions. He suddenly could see and hear angels, demons, auras, and ghosts. And trying to understand this new reality, Jonas crisscrossed the country with his girlfriend Mara looking for answers. In the process, he sought out physicians, religious teachers, scientists, mystics, and spiritual healers to help him come to terms with what happened to him and piece together the puzzle of what it all means. And in the process, he created this arresting documentary, Wake Up. Welcome, Jonas. I'm so happy to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Miriam.
Jonas, you came from a God-fearing background. To suddenly see energies and entities must have been pretty mind-blowing. What did you think was happening?
It was pretty mind-blowing, to say the least. It's interesting. When people have talked about this sort of thing, and they do talk about this sort of thing in the South, I don't really know how open I would have been to it until these experiences started happening to me. So my myopic view on life and death and God and the devil, so to speak, changed radically. And through that, it definitely took quite a while to integrate and understand and to become peace with it.
Mm-hmm. Give us an idea of what you saw and felt.
Well, the first night that it opened up was in a hotel room in San Francisco, and I was preparing for a shoot that I had the next day. And so I was labeling tapes and charging batteries and making a shot list. And that's when the veil dropped. This giant light opened up in the corner of the room, and all these spirits started floating in to the room. Some of it looked angelic, some of it looked demonic, some of it I still don't understand what I was seeing. I started seeing squares and rectangles and interesting geometry on the walls. And that experience lasted for about 6 or 7 hours. And through that experience, there was definitely elation, and I felt great joy, and I also felt tremendous fear with trying to understand. And at the end of the night, what these spirits told me was to expose what was happening. They just said expose it. And be it that I was a documentary filmmaker by trade, 8 months later, I got my crew together, my co-director and producer, Chloe Crespi and Steve Utinsky, and we started making Wake Up.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of recreated what you experienced, and then you took it on the road to see where you could find answers. Well,
the only thing, and I don't really consider recreating, we definitely revisited the scene of the crime, so to speak. But really, I think one of the things that really works in Wake Up is, it's really kind of following me A to Z to understanding. And through these metaphysical or paranormal experiences, it definitely led me to a spiritual path. So it definitely opens up where I'm trying to understand where all this stuff is I'm seeing and hearing. And I started having these spontaneous visions to really becoming at peace with that, understanding that, learning meditation to ground these experiences so they're not distracting, and then really starting the long, arduous road to peace, having peace around it.
You said that they somehow made you understand that you were to tell this story. So that would indicate that you have kind of two-way communication. Is it with some particular entities, or how does that work?
Well, like I said, I don't even know how open I would have been to this stuff. So I certainly believed in God. I had faith in God. But in my experience, we all have spirit guides, or some people would call them guardian angels, or I call them homeboys, so I don't get really locked up into the importance of the words. But they explained to me just to expose it. Now, when I agreed to do this, I didn't realize that I was going to be the emotional center point of the film. Mara, my girlfriend, certainly didn't know that she was going to be part of it. But as time went on, it became more and more clear that this needs to be a story about me trying to understand and discover and ultimately leading me to a spiritual path, which I'd never seen anything like that before. And when it was happening, I was complaining and making comments. I wish there was a roadmap so I could learn and understand where to go. And that was kind of what Wake Up turned out to be. It was my roadmap.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you remember? Do you remember having any unusual experiences similar to this as a child?
I do now. As years went by, as an adult, I have remembrances. But I think all children have this. I think all children are tapped in on some level. I don't know why my, I guess, ability that we all have got pushed into the unconscious, but I do remember weird things or anomalous things that happened as a child. I think what happens sometimes is that these abilities or these ideas or stories aren't encouraged. So some parents or some communities could say, well, that's just the devil's work, which sounds comical to me now, but that was a real thing in the community I grew up with, the kind of God-fearing Southern thing. Some parents may say, this isn't appropriate to talk about, it's strange. And I think children have an innate understanding that they need to hide this part of themselves. And I think that that might have been what happened with me. And it has nothing to do against my parents by any stretch, but I think that I've met many people who said, well, I've always had this ability. I've always had it. And I think they were just encouraged that it wasn't something weird, wrong, or taboo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You spent 2 years before that happened shooting your first feature documentary about bears. So presumably you were out in nature quite a bit. Do you think there was anything about that time in nature that might have made you more receptive to the psychic awakening at this time?
Well, for me personally now, being out in nature is definitely grounding. You know, I think that a lot of people feel that. You know, we live in New York City, which can be very chaotic. But my first feature, Bears, that title might be a little misleading. It wasn't about animals. It was about a different topic. So
I see.
I was mostly in gay bars filming gay men. Bears are like, they're a part of the gay community that are larger, hairier men. It's a common mistake. So I was mostly in gay bars filming this contest. It was.
I repeat the question.
No, it happens all the time.
No, but why do you think it happened then? Did they give you any indication why?
No, and that was definitely the big answer I was chasing. You know, and I would go from different points of the spectrum. Where one, I was just aggravated and kind of angry about this. Like, why the hell is this happening to me? To points of feeling great joy and tremendous relief. Why this happened to me is not an answer I've chased in a long time. I've just accepted it, and I certainly feel at peace with it now. That certainly wasn't the case in the beginning. So in the film, I call this a gift curse, and sometimes it was much more of a curse and a burden to me, and sometimes it was actually, I felt a tremendous blessing and a gift. I think maybe my spiritual immaturity, you know, I had to keep working that out, because to my embarrassment now, but I can clearly see, is I would go through moments of feeling like a victim, because Mara got to witness this, where I couldn't sleep, or I was upset, or I was just scared of the unknown, or what's going to happen next, to the other end of the pendulum where I felt special, like, oh, this is a special thing. Through getting some maturity around these things, I see that both are not correct, but coming to this understanding obviously didn't happen overnight. And if you watch Wake Up, you really kind of see me struggle and kick and scream to try to come to a place of resolution.
Well, as you know, we watched Wake Up about a year ago when it came out, and wrote a review of it at the time. And I was so delighted to see it, because it was a very unsentimental look at a phenomenon that I, from my perspective, see happening all over the place now. It's like there's a wave of people having these experiences and suddenly, you know, going through the same stages, thinking, I'm going mad, I'm going crazy, you know, tell me I'm okay. In fact, you went to a whole bunch of doctors to check you out. You had CAT scans and stuff like that, didn't you?
I did. That's the segment of the film Mara calls Dr. House portion of it. And so, yes, I did go through a battery of tests, because I think it would have been completely irresponsible to come out and say, hey, this has happened to me and this is what it is. So I had an MRI, I had a psychological evaluation, and when all that came back as a clean bill of health is kind of when I started going, down the mystical avenues and the scientific avenues to get answers. What was really surprising, and I was glad to hear it, is a lot of the scientists we spoke to were pretty much saying the same thing that the mystics were saying, with the idea that we're all connected and we're all one, and the idea that your consciousness or spirit or soul certainly survives death, and seeing scientific research around that, and also from shaman, mystics, spiritual teachers talking about this was really amazing. I had no idea that they were linking up so closely, because the science-faith thing is, it's been a huge debate since the beginning. So we felt very lucky to find these extraordinary people.
You did see some extraordinary people from Ramtha to Sufi mystics and Native American shamans. Were any of them more helpful to you than others?
Absolutely. The thing that's encouraging to me, and I feel, great joy as a cheerleader for the human race, is that I fully believe that this information, this understanding, is inside all of us. I think that some things happen like they do to me or you or others, where people get a glimpse of that truth. But the idea that we already have this information, we already have the answers within us, is greatly gratifying. So I may have been able to meditate and get into a place where I was able to understand more, but I also understand that I needed to meet each and every person, hear each and every syllable to get to a place where I was able to receive some of that truth. But they all serve their purpose. They all help me in one way or another. Now, you can see watching Wake Up that sometimes my skepticism is on. Even though I'm having these experiences, you can tell that I haven't fully drank the Kool-Aid. But everyone we included in the movie definitely had a special place for me and reaching another step. Also, what's interesting is, I spent time on a Native American Indian reservation. And so when I went and spoke with a man named Mark Colson, who was instrumental in helping me shift, I told him about these experiences, and he didn't shrug a shoulder. He was like, well, of course. Because these type of experiences are not only part of their day-to-day life, part of their community, it's encouraged at times. So to find people that were really walking the walk and not, speaking in taglines or punching a podium or beating their chest saying I have the answers was very, very refreshing and very comforting.
Mm-hmm. How did you decide who you were going to visit? How did you even know where to look?
Well, I had a very talented co-director named Chloe Crespi, and she was also the cinematographer, and my producer, Steve Utinsky. We wanted to go to places that I thought would be helpful for me to gain information. And so we just started researching on the internet. Chloe had grown up in this kind of spiritual community, so she already knew some of the people to talk to. So if something felt wrong or off to me, I wouldn't go for it. But if it felt right or I felt like I could take another step, we went. And so you'll see things like I go to Ramtha School of Enlightenment. Now, I didn't know who J.Z. Knight was. I didn't know about Ramtha. And so you can see a little bit of my own comfort at the beginning, but that was a big turning point for me as well. And then there's amazing people like Llewellyn Von Lee, the Sufi mystic that helped, Abdi Usadi, who was my acupuncturist, who really kind of showed me the ropes and taught me about meditation and energetic systems and chakras, which, I'd never even heard of this stuff before it happened. Every step, every person we spoke to helped me take another step. So I'm very grateful around that.
Sounds like you had a really crash course in the spirituality.
Yeah, I definitely felt like I was on a fast track, better or worse. And, some people kind of casually look into this. For me, it was something that I needed answers on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes pain and suffering will get people on a spiritual path. Mine was having these kind of crazy William Blake metaphysical roller coaster rides. But what's important to me is where I ended up. So even though it was challenging and very hard at times, I'm certainly glad I took the voyage.
Was there a common thread in the information that you were gathering that came out very strongly?
There was, but what was also interesting is I've always been a curious man, all my life. So when I would get one answer, I would ask 15 more questions. Mm-hmm. But the idea that your consciousness survives and the idea that other people have these experiences, a lot of them, like you were saying, I've probably met more people that have had some sort of experience than not. And I think that everyone has these. I think some acknowledge it, some take it as an opportunity to take a step deeper, and then some people kind of brush them aside. But I I don't think that my story's radically different from others, even though people just can't believe it sometimes. But when they watch the movie, they kind of come around. It's like, wow, that was really amazing what you did. But I think everyone has this. And for me, it was a signpost to a bigger picture. So I would even say, for me, this was a signpost and proof of God. Mm-hmm. But, I know how these things sound. It was like, well, who do you think you are to know this? But that's also another thing I think is interesting. When you see truth and when you have your own experience with truth, there's really nothing anyone can say to take that away. And that's where I feel incredibly blessed, where I'd kind of been chasing the notion of God or who am I or why am I here since a preteen. I think before these experiences happened, maybe 5-6 years before, I'd kind of given up. So
really?
that really is a blessing for me.
Do you think you might have been chosen to have this very intense experience because you are a filmmaker and would be able to tell this story more effectively than most people?
I don't know. I mean, don't think the sense of humor escaped me. I thought it was kind of ironic that, I do documentaries and this happened to me. And it's like, well, God, people are just going to say, oh, he's a failed actor and he concocted this whole story. But, when people see the film, they get it. This is definitely a real experience that I'm going through. Why it happened to me, though, I don't know. I see the comedy in that. Now, if I was a tax attorney or interpretive dancer, I would have brought it out some other way. But this is what I do. This is the route I chose.
Are you're still seeing auras and angels? Yes?
Well, I'll be really honest with you. I've somewhat had misgivings of labeling it angels and demons. I mean, I've most definitely seen things of light and higher vibration and joy and love. And I've also seen things that, definitely were a little spooky and darker and definitely made me feel terrible. That's certainly my interpretation on it. But I guess the hesitation is it's not like this was all the things I saw was only regarding Christianity. I've definitely seen a lot of stuff I have no idea what I'm seeing. I think the point is now I don't really care and I don't really get caught up in it like I used to. Maybe it's because I'm used to it. But I've also heard people say, I guess people have gone through this, you want to dispense with this phenomenon as quick as possible. And when you see Wake Up, Llewellyn Von Lee, who's had his own experiences, he's a Sufi mystic, he's like, well, what do you want to do? And so I'm thinking, well, this would be a good thing to say, or maybe that's how I felt. I want to be the spiritual person and serve. But he could really pick up psychically that I wasn't there yet. I was kind of reciting a tagline, but that truth hasn't really dropped in me because I was indeed still stuck in this metaphysical world that I kept seeing. But as far as still having these experiences, I definitely have them on a day-to-day basis. But I think the key for me was meditation. And Abdi Asadi taught me how to meditate, taught me how to ground the experience. So it's not something that distracts me. So, with the economy going to hell and everyone anxious and upset and scared, walking through Times Square with this channel wide open would not be very fun or healthy. And so I've learned how to turn it down, turn it up when appropriate. And, it's just something I'm used to. It's not this crazy traumatic thing. Obviously, that didn't happen overnight, but I think through a lot of work that we did in the film, definitely I came to a place of peace with it. So it's funny because I'll hear stories around the campfire. Or I had this metaphysical experience and it was so beautiful, and I hung out with Jesus and Buddha, and it's just puppy dogs and unicorns. I'd slightly get envious at that. I was like, well, that wasn't my experience. Mine was a good 50-50. So, I think that the trouble that I had was perhaps I was so freaked out about it is, I would emit fear, and that fear would just draw things out and it could really ducktail. And I think as soon as I started fearing it and started coming to peace and grounding it, the experiences definitely became more and more positive. But that's a hard cycle to get out. And we've been doing the screens of the film, and, there's always 6-7 people that come up or write emails and say, well, this started happening to me 5 months ago, or this has been happening to me for 10 years, but I'm too scared to tell my husband or my coworkers or my family. And I completely understand that place, but I think being honest and just stepping out can definitely be liberating. And I've told people when they start to get smaller because they're walking backwards, nodding because it's just too crazy for them to hear. But I think when people really look deep in their soul, they'll see that they too have had such experiences.
Mm-hmm. I think that this is probably the most important contribution that this film is making. It's giving people almost the permission, the acknowledgement, the permission to acknowledge their experiences and not to be afraid of them and to see that they can work through them. I was wondering, are you getting messages? Are you getting any sense of external directives that you're supposed to be carrying out?
I mean, sometimes, it's pretty funny because I try to be really, really honest with myself, and I definitely believe in free will and predestiny, and sometimes I want to go make my own way, and to be real honest, sometimes I just want them to tell me what to do, which is a funny little balance. But sometimes I definitely get directions and things I should do or things I should avoid, and, I try to stay open and listen to that. The thing that's so interesting to me is everyone gets guidance. It's just regardless if you acknowledge it. And so I think these experiences are really kind of put in a corner for, it's the people that meditate every day or do yoga every day or wear white every day, which is so silly to me. It's such a across-the-board thing. So when you see a businessman that's really good at his job, and that's the last thing that people want to say, oh, he's spiritual, which is silly, when they're tapping into their intuition, which helps them really maneuver and be really good at what they do. So I think everyone gets it. Well, I don't think I know they do. I think it's just important for us to start listening because, if you look at the news, you can kind of see how things are going. And I think that this acknowledgement of spirit and acknowledgement of God or a higher power, whatever you want to call it, coming through to help us shift is really, really exciting.
People like Dan Millman practically coined the term synchronicity. Have you noticed an increase in these synchronicities happening in your life?
Certainly. I most certainly have, which is just kind of sometimes comical to me because I really get that I'm not driving the car. I'm just on a ride. So, at least I was. I don't think I have a corner of the market. We're so attached to being right. We're so attached that I'm behind the wheel and I'm doing this. And what these experiences have shown me is, no, I'm just another character in this big movie or in this dream. And I try to stay open and let spirit guide me to what I'm supposed to do. Now, I still have an ego, and I still work on it, but sometimes, no, I want to do this, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes I see, okay, I need to listen to my guidance.
Mm-hmm. And has it occurred to you that perhaps your guidance might just be another aspect of yourself?
It has, and I mean, I could really go on and on pondering that. For me, for whatever reason, I'm at peace with the answers I received through the film. But that could be, as some people call, your higher self, or they could say that that's God, but you are God and you're attached to God. All these things make sense to me. I'm not troubled anymore with trying to completely understand it. I think that this has obviously strengthened my faith. And, when ups and downs come, I really stick to these teachings to maneuver through it. And that's really the blessing. Before that, my faith, it was just that. I was hoping that there was a bigger thing, and I felt it in my bones, but I really didn't have any idea, like most people don't. But having these experiences is always confirmation. It's also been a real incentive to try to clean up my act, and understanding that my thoughts and actions affect everything, everyone, not just the people in my life, that we're all energetically connected. So if I'm going to walk around full of rage or full of depression, that it really affects everything. But if I want to try to raise my vibration to be in a more joyous, loving place, that also affects. So, I'm not trying to sound like a platitude or a Hallmark card, but I definitely live my life by that now, and that would have never happened without these experiences.
It sounds like we all need these experiences. We need them to multiply exponentially.